In this video, we're going to learn how to find a lowest common denominator. So let's say we have the fraction 4/9 and the fraction 2/1. So to add or subtract these two fractions, we need a common denominator, and more specifically the lowest common denominator. So this video is going to teach you how to find the lowest common denominator. So to find the lowest common denominator, we need to find the lowest common multiple of the two denominators of these fractions. So we need to find the lowest common multiple of 9 and 1. So how do you find the lowest common multiple? So we write down the two numbers. So we write down 9 and 1, and we make a list of the multiples of the numbers. So what are the multiples of 9? So the multiples of 9 are 9, and then we have to add another 9, so we get 18. And then if we add another 9, we get 27, and then 36, and then 45, and we can keep going. And we do the same thing for the other denominator. So what are the multiples of 1? Well, when we add 1 to 1, we get 2, and then when we add 1 to 2, we get 3, and so on and so forth. So right now I've made a list of the multiples of 9 and 1. So we need to find the lowest common multiple, right? The lowest common multiple. So the lowest common multiple is the multiple that's common to both numbers. So how do we find that? Well, we look at if there's a number that is the same in the first row and the second row. So in these two lists, we see that 9, and if we were to continue this list, we would actually have a 9, right? So this, I ended the list at 7, but if you were to keep going, we would have 7, 8, 9, and 10, and etc. So if you were to look at this list, we have 9 here, and we have a 9 here. So 9 is our lowest common denominator. Lowest common denominator. So from here, we can rewrite our fractions in terms of the lowest common denominator. Okay, so basically when we find the lowest common denominator, we have to write both fractions with the lowest common denominator. So our lowest common denominator is 9. So we have to write 4/9 and 2/1 as both fractions over 9. Okay, so how do we get the numerator of our new fraction? So these are our old fractions, and these are our new fractions, okay, with the lowest common denominator. So we already know the denominator has to be equal to 9, but how do we get the numerator? So we just have to multiply the numerator from our old fraction by a specific number. So how do we find that number? Well, what did we multiply the denominator in the old fraction to get the denominator in the new fraction? So how do you go from 9 to 9? Well, we have to multiply 9 by 1, right? So 9 times 1 gives us 9. So the trick here is we have to multiply the numerator of the old fraction by the same number that we multiply the denominator of the old fraction. So here we multiplied 9 by 1, so we have to multiply the numerator, which is 4, by 1 as well. So 4 times 1 is 4, and that gives us the numerator of our new fraction. So same thing with this fraction. So what do we multiply 1 by to get 9, our new denominator? We multiply 1 by 9, right? So we have to do the same thing to the numerator. We have to multiply 2 by 9, which is 18, to get our new numerator. So now we have converted both of our fractions, our old fractions, 4/9 and 2/1, into new fractions with our lowest common denominator, right? Which we found to be 9. Okay. So let's try another problem. Let's say we had the two fractions, 2 over 5 and 7 over 2. So how would we find the lowest common denominator for this problem? Well, we see our two of our denominators are 5 and 2. So we have to find the lowest common multiple of 5 and 2. So again, we list out all the multiples of 5. So 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, and we can keep going. And all our multiples of 2. So we have 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, and we can keep going. So now, the next step is to check, is there a number that's common in these two rows? So is there a common multiple? Well, we can see that 10 is common, right? Because 10 appears in both rows. So 10 is actually our lowest common multiple, and that's also our lowest common denominator. Okay, so we found our lowest common denominator. So what's the next step? So we have to write both of these fractions in terms of our lowest common denominator, right? If we want to later subtract or add these two fractions. So we have to write both of these fractions with 10, because 10 is our lowest common denominator. So what did we do in our previous problem? Well, we figured out how we got, so this, if this was our old fraction, and this is our new fraction, and this is our old fraction, and this is our new fraction. We figured out how we got from 5 to 10. What do we have to multiply 5 by to get 10? We have to multiply by 2, right? Because 5 times 2 is 10. So whatever we multiply the denominator of the old fraction, we have to do the same thing to the numerator. So we have to multiply the numerator 2 times 2, which gives us 4. So our new fraction, written in terms of our lowest common denominator, is 4 over 10. Okay, so moving on to this one. So we have 7 over 2. So what do we have to do to 2 to get 10? We have to multiply by 5, right? So we have to multiply the 7 by 5 as well. So 7 times 5 is 35. So 35 over 10 is our new fraction. So basically what we have done is we've converted 2 over 5 and 7 over 2 into equivalent fractions, but they're written in terms of the lowest common denominator, right? Lowest common denominator. And we need to write it in terms of the lowest common denominator, because to add or subtract fractions, we need to have the same denominator, right? We can't add the 2 over 5 and the 7 over 2 unless we have it written in terms of the lowest common denominator. And we've just done that.